I'm sure many of you know Steve Hiniker. He's the founding director of 1,000 Friends of Wisconsin. He's been working on, he founded that in 2003, and before that he was with the Wisconsin Citizens Utility Board and also in the environmental policy. He was the coordinator of environmental policy for Milwaukee. So he's been out there really doing things. It's because of Steve that we have brownfields legislation and we have recycling programs done the right way. So he's someone that gets things done on the ground. Steve?
Thanks. I'm going to have to catch my breath for a second. That's good, Joel. Thank you. Okay, so my presentation is going to take a little less time because I'm going to cover a little less distance. But what I really want to do is kind of focus in on the limits of technology. And, you know, because when we think about transportation, we always think, oh, let's go see what the latest car is. The Prius is getting good mileage or whatever. We're trying to do great things with really efficient cars, and hopefully they're fast and they're comfortable and things like that. But there are limits to this, and actually, I think the interesting part of working on transportation issues as they affect the urban environment go beyond the technology and really get into the softer sciences of sociology and planning. And I think that that's where the actual relevant thing for most people is, because technology is going to be done by somebody else and you're just going to go out and buy it. You're not going to be involved in designing it. You're going to support it by your purchase. But your habits and the things that you do and where you live and how you interrelate with people will have a huge impact on our emissions, our environment, and the amount of carbon that we put into the air. So that's why I put up this first slide. You know, this is our traditional view back in the 50s. You know, the car is here, it's going to save us, it's going to, you know, drive itself down the highway and everything's going to be beautiful. But the reality turns out a little bit different. When technology is misapplied, and, you know, when we started into the auto age back in the 40s, 50s, whatever you want to have as your entry point, we really had no idea what we were about to do. Fortunately, well, unfortunately maybe, but one person did. Lewis Mumford, I think, had a great insight. And he was talking about the interstate highway system back in 1956, before it had really started. It will do more damage to American cities than all the bombing did to cities of Europe during World War II in the next 10 years. And, you know, he was a brilliant person and very accurate in his prediction. In fact, if you can just see the damage. If you look at Detroit back in 1949, it was one of America's great cities. It was prosperous. It's where cars were being made. People made their homes. It was a great urban environment. You look at it today, it does look like it was bombed in World War II. You look at the amount of place where people used to live that is now taken up by conveyance of automobiles and storage of automobiles. And this is what we have done to our cities all over this nation. I mean, if you go to Milwaukee, beautiful city. In fact, Milwaukee was the second most densely populated city in the US in 1953. You look in the foreground, there's a beautiful old train station there. And there's a slightly different view, but it's the same area today. And the amount of real estate taken by the Marquette interchange, just the direct impact alone is well, it's obscene. And what it did to the city is it divided it into different quadrants. You can see you have the downtown now separate from the Third Ward, which is separate from the Nottoway Valley, which is separate from the near west side. And it acts as a barrier today. If you try to get from the Third Ward to downtown, you have to go through a very unfriendly pedestrian environment underneath 8 lanes of freeway. It's something that takes away life from the city, and you have all of the cars that are coming in there and creating all the pollution that they do. So how did we get there, and what can we do? I mean, one of the problems is back over the past 60, 70 years, we trusted our planning, really, our transportation planning to traffic engineers. Traffic engineers do great work, but they're not planners. If you ask a traffic engineer how to solve a traffic problem, they can tell you. If you ask them to plan your future, this is what it's going to look like. I mean, we need to have the decisions being made by the right people. So, traffic engineers, traffic engineering. Now, this actually works. This is level of service. This is what is used to justify whether you need to build a bigger road or not. So, the left side, you have level of service, as they call it, B, which is, frankly, I think, overbuilt. Level A is severely overbuilt. And on the right side, you've got level of service F. This means you have to widen the road. Now, this may work in rural areas between cities and things like that, but when you actually get to a city, this is of no use at all, because if the city has any value, it's always going to be crowded. You're always going to have congestion. In fact, congestion is an indicator of a healthy city. If it's not congested, what are you doing there? No one's going there. So, you can continue to build wider and wider roads in the city, causing more and more ecological damage, and never get ahead of the game, but the road builders will love the money that they're getting to build the roads. So what we need to do is focus on a change on how we measure what we need for transportation purposes. A lot of states are doing this. California has pretty much rejected the level of service, and they've got a matrix of different inputs that they use. What's the environmental impact? What's the social impact? And they have a grading system, and this is one of the many factors, but it's not the only factor. And in an urban area, I'd argue that you really need to throw this at the bottom of the pile when you consider whether or not you want to increase the size of a highway. The other thing that you get with cars and through technology, I'm all for the Prius, I'm all for fuel efficiency, because that's a huge part of solving the problem. We're never going to get there if we don't increase the efficiency of our vehicles. Electric vehicles, if they're powered by the right power sources, are great. But one of the things I'm going to show you here, it's an old slide, so you have to bear with me. But we prepared this 7 years ago, and this was for the governor's global warming task force. And the relevant lines that you want to look at here are.
Here you have a laser right there.
Okay, here we go. So the blue line on the bottom is 2005 CO2 emissions from transportation sources in Wisconsin.
You can also use, you can just use this too.
Oh, there you go. All kinds of fancy stuff here. Forget the yellow line because it's no longer relevant. The purple line is the new fuel efficiency standards for vehicles. And in 2007, I think this was modeled. What you see is it takes a while for the new fleet to replace the old vehicles on the road. And so you get this slow rise in emissions, and then by 2015 you have a complete replacement of the existing fleet with more efficient vehicles, and then you see a decrease in emissions, and finally by the year 2024 you're back to where you started in 2005. Our goal in the task force was actually to get to 22% below 2022. So you can see that technology alone isn't going to get you to the desired result. Now, if you in fact implement mechanisms that reduce the amount of traffic that the amount of driving that you have to do, such as denser development, better transit systems, and all kinds of other things that you can do at the local level through planning primarily, and better designed neighborhoods with more amenities nearby. We modeled that according to what was done by the Resources for the Future, I think was the outfit that did this. And you see the new purple line. We exceed our goal. So the technology alone gets you to where you started in 2024, and here you've got about a 20 or 30% reduction. So just through what I call the soft sciences of planning and urban planning and smart investments, you can have a huge difference that's really going to make a difference on the amount of emissions that you get from your vehicles, as well as it's going to be good for the cities, as Joel has pointed out. Again, Lewis Mumford, one of my favorites. A good transportation system minimizes unnecessary transportation. Simple enough. So let's start focusing on accessibility rather than mobility. I mean, if you don't have to drive, those are miles that you miss. So let's take a look at the map of Madison here for a second. I don't know, does everyone know about walk score? Walk Score is a simple program that it's based on Google Maps, and what it does, you give it a location, your address or something like that, and it identifies amenities in the area, you know, stores, churches, libraries, whatever, your jobs and all that kind of stuff. So if you look at Madison, they give this a 0 to 100 rating. Madison overall has a rating of 47, not very good. I mean, pretty much you have to drive your car in Madison, except if you happen to live in one of these green areas. And the green areas are much closer to, well, there's a couple of areas. Willie Street over there is like 100, and some near west side neighborhoods are very high. But you'll notice that the green areas are where you can reduce your emissions because you have the ability to walk to your destinations rather than drive everywhere. And they also tend to be the most entertaining and viable and livable neighborhoods. You know, you could live over in Hawks Landing if you wanted to, but there's nothing to do there except walk to your car and drive to the city and get some entertainment downtown or go to your job downtown or something like that. So it's possible, in fact, it's beneficial to make these kinds of investments in cities. And the great cities of the world that you're interested in going to, Paris, Rome, New York, Chicago, they have wide swaths of green areas that people want to go to. They're highly desirable. You're also getting more to there's a problem in the affordability of the housing, but I'll say that the technology that comes with a Prius or a Tesla is not available to a person without the means to buy that car. So I think that questions of equity and questions of livability, certainly the proximity of services is a great advantage. And the other thing is when you live in a city, you tend to live in a smaller dwelling. Maybe you have shared walls. The dwelling itself uses less energy. So this is, you know, the driving versus residential density. If you look at this map, you can pick your own sweet spot as to where you are, but if you look at where Madison is, we are somewhere up here because we are about 7 houses per acre residential density. A lot of room for improvement, a lot of gains that could be realized. But in the meantime, we still have great places to go, and they serve as indicators of what could be and I think objectives that we could realize. No hits on technology. It needs to be done, but we also need to really start our focus on local communities. Thank you.